In news just in, DA leader Maimane is briefing the media on the outcomes of the party's Federal Council held over the weekend. Let's go live to that event.
Decisive action. And therefore, along with those, we'll be making a number of proposals in the next while, setting up a directorate that will deal specifically with this issue of corruption. Because we believe the first act we can take is to ensure that there's institutional capacity that fights against corruption at all levels in public and private sector. That's why as a DA, we've acted against Bell Pottinger, KPMG, McKinsey, and will further continue to engage the subject of corruption across all sectors. To this effect, it's for that reason that we welcome the formulation of the ad hoc committee in Parliament that seeks to deal with state-owned enterprises and the investigations that are going on there. But that can't be enough. As many of you know, I've written to the Speaker of the National Assembly and given her a date of the 31st of October to ensure that she must respond to us about setting up a centralized ad hoc committee that will investigate the issue of state capture. We want to give opportunity to South Africans who have been victims, some who have been beneficiaries to this issue, to come to a centralized ad hoc committee to investigate. And therefore, we've put the Speaker of the National Assembly on terms to say that she must give us a response by the 31st, because we must get to the bottom of ensuring that state capture is dealt with. The second key policy proposals that we put on the table speaks to this issue I've raised about the supply side of young people into the economy. It argues how we ensure that a child who attends early childhood development center is looked after and can get the adequate facilities in that regard. It further purports the issue of saying, how do we ensure young people get through school? What programs do we give for young South Africans post-university? How do we finance university financing to ensure that poor students can get better access? And what do we do with young people who are described as the NEETs, who are not in employment, who are not in education or in training, and what programs we put forward behind that? These policy discussions, equally so, will be served across the organization so that further discussions can occur, and that towards the Policy Congress, which is scheduled for next year as the Democratic Alliance, we can adopt them formally. I also want to say that we've also adopted our universal healthcare policy, which has maintained that we need to give equitable healthcare for all South Africans, especially poor South Africans. These, to me, give a fresh alternative to the ANC's policy offer. We will then equally so, over the next number of months, be dealing with the question of safety, the question of migration, and then lastly, how do we ensure that the demand side of the economy, the growth of the economy, is such that more people can create work. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the midst of a crisis. 9 million South Africans are unemployed, 53% of South Africans are poor, and even more shameful than that is the fact that now 4 children under this ANC government die every day on the back of malnutrition. So whilst there's an inquiry on life as Esidimeni, we can't denounce and ignore the fact that it must be something that is an indictment against all of us, that in fact 4 children are dying every day in South Africa. And as to that effect, we are proposing interventions as to how we deal with malnutrition and how do we ensure that we don't keep perpetuating the number of South Africans who are poor. We also recognize the fact that if we're going to form an alternative to the ANC in 2019, we have to demonstrate to South Africans that where we govern, government is working for the people, and that in fact there is change in DA governance. It's to this effect this Federal Council considered at length a government report that focuses on a number of things, but also the state of coalitions. It is to this effect, when we look at where coalitions are, that I want to affirm the fact that, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place, that where the respective areas where with the DAs in government, coalitions are remaining strong. Starting in Nelson Mandela Bay, we believe that the coalition is stable. All coalition partners are working together to bring the city into a place where it focuses on delivery of services for all South Africans. The government at Nelson Mandela Bay, as has been led by Ethel Trollip, has now been working with all the respective coalition partners to ensure that we advance the work of creating work and ultimately dealing with the questions of poverty. We have set ourselves the objective of eradicating buckets in Nelson Mandela Bay as a form of sanitation, and that objective will be met by the end of this year. Along with that, we've seen the fact that in Johannesburg and Tshwane, that coalition is back on track. We believe that our support for the budget and items that have come through, as indicated in the last council meetings of both, show that the work that we're doing with the EFF and other partners is such that we can put the people's government first and ensure that, as in Joburg and Tshwane, we focus on eradicating poverty and ensuring that more South Africans are able to find work. We also want to recognize that the city of Cape Town is focused on delivering for the people of South Africa. As many of you know, that we looked at the hard work that must be done to ensure that we deal with the water crisis that sits in the city of Cape Town. We further looked at how we can ensure that more finances is raised and to deal with different alternatives, a desalination plant, and underground water supply. I also welcome the fact that along with the caucus matters that are taking place there, an investigation is well on its way and will deliver a report soon to ensure that we can get that caucus focused on the objectives I've put forward. I want to reflect on the question of taking place on this issue of congresses. The DA in and of itself as a democratic organization supports the idea of congresses. And like any other organization, we will go through a number of electoral congresses that are taking place. I'm glad to welcome and congratulate the leader of the Western Cape, Bonginkosi Madikizela, which province has already held a very successful congress where I'm glad to note that there were no chairs being thrown around there. Also, he follows after a successful elective congress in the Eastern Cape that was held in the same venue where chairs were being thrown when Ngaba Banga was elected there. Gauteng will be holding its elective congress in the next month, where a leader will be elected there for the period coming up, and then the rest of the provinces will follow likewise, culminating in our congress, our national congress that will take place next year in April. Ladies and gentlemen, we also focus as an organization in building structures all across the ground. And I welcome the opportunity that the DA will be going all across communities and cities, establishing structures and establishing a way where we can ensure that we engage more South Africans. Because we believe, often people hear the wrong things about the DA. We've got to put our own machinery on the ground, and that's been part of the deliberations that have taken place here at Federal Council to ensure that there's more groundwork by DA people. Lastly, we look at the issues of litigation that the organization is engaged with. I welcome the decision on Friday on the judgment against Jacob Zuma at the Supreme Court of Appeal. We maintain that these charges now stand. Jacob Zuma must face prosecution, and I have already delivered the letter to Advocate Sean Abrams insisting that Jacob Zuma must be served with an indictment and appear in court at the soonest available date. We've had 8 years of delay on this issue, and it's time that we get Jacob Zuma an opportunity to appear before court. The second court case that we deliberated on and have considered is the fact that we've gone to fight to ensure that black farmers are able to own the land upon which they work. This is an historical legacy where the LRED program gave opportunities for black farmers to be able to lease that land and ultimately be to be owners of that land. The ANC government has reneged on that matter, and I've briefed our legal team to ensure that those who are deprived of that land will ultimately be able to get it. We believe that the ANC government now sits on almost 1.4 million hectares of land, and that land must be ready for ownership and distribution. And this scheme must be accelerated to ensure that qualifying black farmers must take ownership stake in the land they farm, ensuring economic empowerment and true freedom. It's for that reason that I've taken the matter and we're saying we're going to act in litigation against the ANC government. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, South Africa has an opportunity in 2019 where we can stop talking about state capture and stop talking about corruption and focus on an economy that is growing for all South Africans. And we believe that DA is the only alternative to be able to do that. It's for that reason, as we focused on the 2019 election, that I welcome the meeting that has been scheduled with the IEC on the 23rd of October to ensure that we can put on the agenda, how do we ensure that the elections in 2019 are free and fair? How do we ensure that there is a thorough investigation on the black ops operation that was put by the ANC at last elections? It is our objective to continue to show South Africans that we are the alternative for South Africa and the DA holds the future for this country. And therefore, it's great to come to a federal council in a party that is focused on building a new beginning and bringing complete change for all South Africans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. We'll now move on to...
Well, that's the leader of the DA, Mr. Maimane, reporting on the Federal Council meeting they had over the weekend. And, of course, no chairs thrown there, but sounds like, I mean, it's no, you know, the ANC also had chairs thrown in the Eastern Cape, of course. But, of course, the DA, we had a very dirty war that was fought in public and in the papers and headlines with the mayor being accused of corruption by her own party. So that is something that he hasn't bothered to mention just yet. But, of course, we will hear some more as we go. And with that, we go to a break.